Okay, so this is the Bible study for Matthew chapter 8, verses 23 through 27. And the text says, what did we talk about? Or I'm sorry, that's the question. The text says, then he got into the boat and his disciples followed him. Suddenly a furious storm came up on the lake, so that the waves swept over the boat. But Jesus was sleeping. The disciples went and woke him, saying, Lord, save us. We're going to drown. He replied, you of little faith, why are you so afraid? Then he got up and rebuked the winds and the waves, and it was completely calm. The men were amazed and asked, what kind of man is this? Even the winds and the waves obey him. So remember that you can download a PDF copy of this Bible study at www.abqnaz.org/alive. And number one on our Bible study that I just started to read was, what did we talk about in our last study in the book of Matthew? I don't really remember. If you're studying with us as we're doing this, we've had a break for the holidays, and we have also had um, a break for a couple of weeks to prepare for membership. And so, if you're studying this at some other time, maybe you're studying this just a week after, but this is about 3 or 4 weeks since we last studied this, and so maybe I don't really remember is an appropriate answer. B, the cost of following Jesus. Yes, definitely. We talked about the cost of following Jesus. C, the importance of instant obedience and not putting Jesus second for another priority. Yes, remember that people said they would follow him. Teacher, I will follow you wherever you go. And Jesus says, foxes have dens and birds have nests, but the Son of Man has no place to lay his head. And another disciple said, Lord, first let me go and bury my father. But Jesus said, follow me and let the dead bury their own dead. And we talked about the need to not put Jesus on hold and follow him once it's convenient for us, but rather to follow him when he calls. Um, and perhaps, um, somebody who needs to bury his father. We talked about the possibility that his father wasn't even dead yet, and he was saying, once my father is gone, then I'll be able to follow. Or it's possible that he was, and it was just the matter of burial. But either way, Jesus is saying, if you want to follow now. Don't wait. And for us, we have a lot of times some excuses or reasons why we'll do what Jesus says when all of the circumstances are right. Once it gets to a certain way, but not right now. And that, by the way, that certain way, I don't know if it ever comes. If there's a reason not to follow now, another reason will come up later on. So we need to just obey. Jesus knows our circumstance when he calls us, and we need to just obey. Number two, what is happening now in 8:23? Then he got in the boat and his disciples followed him. So, they've been teaching, healing, whatever, calling disciples on in one place. They get in the boat, and his disciples get in with him, and they're about to head across the water. Number three says, what happens in 8:24? Suddenly, that's not really a happening, but it does tell us how things happen. Suddenly, something happened. So they were sort of out on the water, and something blew up. Not boom, but whoosh. A storm. So I was thinking about this. My family and I, when I was growing up, had a speedboat. We lived in Indiana, not New Mexico, so that probably made a lot more sense. And we would go out on the lake on a Saturday or something like that and just spend the day, go swimming, go skiing, things like that. And I do remember one time we happened to be out in the middle of the lake, and we were skiing and then things, and and uh, and a storm blew in, and we weren't really ready to be done for the day, and the storm blew in pretty fast, and so it sort of came in such a way that maybe we could see it coming, but we didn't think it was going to be that bad. But it came in pretty abruptly, and boats don't go, at least the speedboat like we had. We didn't have some fancy thing with a couple of motors or whatever. So boats don't go that fast. I think ours is top speed was 35 miles an hour. Maybe you could switch out the prop and get it up just a little bit more or something like that. But if you're out on the other side of the lake, depending on the size of the lake, and the storm blows up, you're not necessarily going to get to the dock in time. And so we had a canopy. We put up the canopy and kind of hunkered down. The waves started blowing, and we figured if it blew up fast, maybe it'd blow away fast. And so we just kind of stayed out in the middle, and um, can be dangerous. The wind can blow you against things, so we kind of stayed out in open water, which has higher waves, but at least the boat's not going to drift into the shore, or into a tree, or into something. Um, I just remember how fast that storm blew up, and or blew in, if you want to say it that way. And I was, I don't know, middle school or so, and just um, seemed like kind of a big deal. I still remember it today. Now that being said, my dad was there. He had kind of control of the boat. Um, we weren't on a body of water. Our boat was likely, um, more um, highly engineered, I guess, than the boat they were in. It was unlikely to take on the level of water. We had a bilge pump, so if it took on any water, we could pump it right back out and things like that. We weren't really. I don't feel in any major danger. Now, if we'd been out on the ocean, absolutely. If we'd have been out on a bigger lake, perhaps. Um, but here are the disciples in a boat that doesn't have, um, you know 2,000 more years of engineering put into it, to make sure it has all the mechanics to stay safe and stay floating. Um, on another note, one day we had parked the boat on shore, and we were camping, and um, somebody had, when they launched the boat, forgot to put in the plug in the back, which you could pull out when you pulled it out of the water. You pull out the plug so that the water, any excess water in the bottom, would just drain. Somebody had forgotten to put that plug back in when we launched the boat. As long as we were, it was in the back, not in the bottom. So as long as we were, in the boat, driving the boat, water went out the back anyway and didn't usually go in. But we parked it and nobody noticed. And when we came back down to check on it, it was on the bottom. It was resting on the bottom. Now it was pulled up to the um, it was pulled up to the shore, so you could still climb in the bow, and that was dry, but the back of the boat was on the bottom and wet. And the first thing we did is, we got to put the plug in. Put the plug in, climbed in the front, started bailing. Once we got it up enough that more water wasn't coming in, we were able to turn on the bilge pump, and it pumped the thing out, and the whole thing just came back up. See, that's the way boats are now. And by the way, that wasn't a brand new boat either. So I'm sure it's come along even since then. But um, anyway, So I've been in situations like that. I've been in a situation where the boat started pumping water in with the engine while we were out in the middle of the lake. That was scary. But we were able to turn on the bilge pump and give us enough time to fix the problem before we went down. Meanwhile, somebody else was driving and headed toward the shore. So, anyway, I know a little bit about being out in boats in the middle of the water. Um, a furious storm came up on the lake. That's B, and it happened suddenly. C, the waves swept over the boat. So that's the thing that I have not experienced. Waves so high that they would sweep over the edge of the boat. And without a bilge pump, without power like that, that would be a very scary thing because it would be hard to get the water out faster than it's coming in. C, uh, they seemed, that should be they, seemed disturbed and told him, Lord, save us, we're going to drown. Um, oh, I skipped. D was Jesus was sleeping. So number 4 says, what did the disciples do according to 8:25? A, Jesus was sleeping, so they laid down to sleep as well. This is not the answer. If you read the text with us, this is not the answer. Oh, Jesus is all right, so we should be all right. Maybe that would have been a better answer. Maybe that's what we wish we would have done if we were in that situation, or what we wish they would have done. But that's not what happened. Instead, they went and woke him, and they seemed disturbed and told him, Lord, save us, we're going to drown. Like, Jesus, why are you sleeping? We're in a storm. Don't you see what's going on here? How can you even rest? We're afraid for our lives, and we're going to drown. We need your help. Now, I don't know what they thought he was going to do, because when he took care of it, they seemed surprised. So I don't know what they thought he was going to do, but they knew that that he was the answer. They knew that talking to him was the answer. So, and that's kind of an interesting thing, because when I did first come to Christ, I went through a period of my life where I didn't really believe in God at all. And then I got into a crisis much like this. And when I was in crisis, I cried out for the help of God, or the help of Christ. And I'm not sure. I didn't really believe that he'd show up, but he did. And then I was amazed, and it changed my life from there on out. So maybe that's sort of the situation that they're in. But they cry out to him, um, which uh, which seems sort of funny, because then they're surprised when he's able to do something about this. Um, Number 5, how did Jesus respond when he woke up, according to 8:26? A, it is good that you woke me, only I can take care of this. But he didn't say that. Um, Instead, he said, you of little faith, why are you so afraid? Which is B and C. So Jesus didn't say, hey, this is the right thing to do, only I can take care of this. I mean, I'm thinking about the times when they couldn't cast out. I don't think we've gotten there yet, but the times when they couldn't cast out a particular demon, and Jesus says, this one only comes out with prayer and fasting. Um, and they were asking, why couldn't we do this? So that's a little bit further along in the process, I think, here. Um, but it's interesting. Jesus doesn't say, only I could have done this. He doesn't say, you were right to wake me. He says, you of little faith, why are you so afraid? So I don't know what he expected them to do, or what they should have done, whether they should have woke him but not been afraid, or sort of what his expectation for them was. And that's kind of like, I'm wrestling with this, this is a story that I've heard 100 times, taught probably 30 times, and even as I sort of receive it this time, I'm thinking, what should they have done? if his sort of chastising is you didn't have faith, why are you afraid? Does that mean they should have woke him up, but they should have woke him up more peacefully and not so afraid? Or does that mean they should have sort of sat in the storm, trusting that God had it under control, and not woke him up? I really, if I knew the answer to this at this point in my life, um, I think maybe it would be the answer to some of the things that I've been trying to work through over the last 2 or 3 years with my faith and understanding my anxiety and things like that. And so I'm really processing this. Because he got up, rebuked the wind and the waves, and then it was completely calm. He was obviously the answer. And I think most of the time we sort of teach this, that waking him up was the right thing to do, but but they shouldn't have had to be so afraid in the process. So number 6 says, "What do you do when you are afraid in the midst of the storms of life?" Pray. Okay, yeah. Panic. Most of us would say pray is the right answer, I think, before we even get into the rest of this. We would also probably say panic is more reasonable what actually happens in our life, or call my mom, or stress. E is trust. Pray and trust can go side by side. In fact, I don't think you would pray unless you trusted at some level. Why would you go to God and ask for help unless you believed that He could and would help you? And so they had a level of faith that was enough to wake him up. But he seems to be addressing their level of faith. And I just, I'll be really transparent here. I've been working out over the years. Our church has been through financial crisis, and we have had multiple situations. Most of the, I mean, every time God has answered prayer, every time God has helped us through. And at times I know that God has said to me, do you think you care about what I'm doing here at this church and in this community? Do you think you care more than I do? And I have to say, no, I don't care about it more than you do. He's like, okay, then why are you worried about it as if you're the one that it leans on instead of me? And so I've been thinking that through, and there have been times when I felt like I was ready to have a heart attack. There was times where I think I shared this a couple weeks ago in service. There was a time where we needed like $8,000 or something like that day, and I didn't find out that we were that short until that day. A check that was supposed to come in, it came in, but it came in so short that we were still short $8,000, and that was news to me. And I was kind of upset because I felt like somebody else probably knew that, but didn't prepare me for it. And so then, we instead of having a week to get ready for that, we had a couple hours. We couldn't put out payroll by the end of the day, and my wife went to prayer, while I panicked. I think that's the truth of it. And she prayed at the altar, and God told her to ask somebody, and the person she asked gave like $5,000 that day. And that happened, I think, on more than one occasion. I'm thinking of one particular time, but I remember more than once that she went to prayer and somebody gave a large chunk of money. Um, and and we were in that kind of situation. In recent years, we've been trying to set ourselves up to not be in positions like that, to be a little bit better stewards of what we have in advance, to make sure that we don't put ourselves in those kind of positions. And yet we've still found ourselves in maybe not crisis of we need, $8,000 by this afternoon, but we have found ourselves in a crisis like hey, at the end of this month, we're not going to be able to pay our bills and we're going to have to either not pay the mortgage or let staff go or whatever. And we found ourselves in that position. So, um, 2 times ago, when we found ourselves in that position, I went to prayer, felt like God gave me some very specific things to do. And I did those things, and God took care of our church, and He took care of my family, and I felt like, man, I'm really making progress, because now instead of panicking like I used to, and going and digging into the finances and trying to figure out a way, the ways that I usually come up with money and figure it out, are not working. So now we're at a place where we really need God's help. And God said, ask this person, do this. And I thought that was progress. Maybe I finally caught up with my wife's level of faith and what she was doing for years, perhaps. But then last time, even all of that, I said, God, what do you want me to do? And I felt like He said, nothing. And that was new for me, because in the past I had I used to say I found $10,000 today. I didn't ever find $10,000, but I moved numbers around and figured out how we could work through the month if we cut here and increased here, and things like that. And I honestly have considered myself sort of a budget wizard at some point, and I don't mean wizard in some kind of ungodly way, but just sort of, I've been able to figure things out. And I felt like, by the way, I felt like I wasn't trying to be arrogant or take credit. I felt like God gave me those gifts. Um, and I feel like over the last, sort of 14 years of ministry as the lead pastor and a few years as the associate pastor in charge of administration, I feel like many, many times I've used the gifts that God gave me, to find a way through, and um, and God has gotten us through in that way by using those gifts that He gave me, and we got through. And I don't feel like I was ever very arrogant, but I do feel like I took on a lot of that anxiety, and this is what I'm talking about, that I felt when we approached another crisis, that I very much felt like that was on me to deal with, instead of realizing that it was on God, even though the on me meant using the gifts that God had given me, and I still gave glory to God for that. But the stress level was on me, and so then 2 times ago when I went to pray, I very much felt like that stress level was on me, and yet I didn't know what else I could do. And I do feel like God gave me step by step, and once I had step by step, I did those things. Some of them required humility. They were hard to do. I had to ask for help from some people, and I do think all of that was growth in my faith too. But this last time when He said, um, you don't need to do anything, it was really trust the people of God. We have a wonderful staff. Trust the people of God that I've put in place, not I, but that God has put in place to continue doing what I've told them to do, and I'm going to take care of the rest. And so the last time we went through this, we just trusted God and sort of rode out the low, and it came back very fast. And as of today, we are very blessed financially. Now, I don't know if we're going to have another dip. We have highs and lows over the years, ebbs and flows, and that's normal. But I think, getting back to the story, for me, when I went to prayer and God gave me a specific list of things to do, that was very much the let's wake up Jesus. Am I waking up Jesus in the panic, or am I waking up Jesus in confidence and trust? I'll just say that probably more in panic than confidence and trust, but maybe getting better each time, I hope. Um, the last time I felt like God was almost like, it's not that I still went to prayer and he said, there's nothing to do. It was almost like he's saying, Jesus isn't sleeping. I'm watching. Just wait and trust. And so I'm illustrating sort of a growth, hopefully, that we can go through, that I'm going through in my faith. Um, and I'm not suggesting we ever get to the point where we don't pray. But I think, is it possible to get to the place where you are just with Jesus and not needing to? I know we talk about crying out to Jesus. If you're hurting, if you're afraid, if you're we encourage crying out to the one who can save you from death. Jesus did it. And so I think there's a place for that urgency of prayer and that crying out. There's a place for that, but I think also that is balanced with the idea that we can sort of just rest in his presence and trust that he has everything under control. And I'll just say this, that I am the one that is afraid to say that because there's too many people that are very good. See, my number one or number two strength on the strength finder is responsible. And so I feel responsible. And I'll just tell you that I get very frustrated with people that seem to sort of, in the name of just trusting God, not do anything. And I'm like, I'm trusting God, and here I am having to do all the work that you're not doing. And so you're trusting God, apparently, that He'll speak to me to do everything. And I'm not really, I mean, it sounds facetious. I really think that sometimes. I'm not even really joking, that the frustration comes of people that just sort of rest in the presence of God and trust Him. Is I start to wonder, are they trusting God or are they trusting me? Because God seems to be talking to me about doing something. And I'm not. I think God's talking to them about doing something too, but they're not listening, and they think they're more spiritual, but actually they're not. So that's kind of that wrestling that I have when we're talking about faith. Um, but I think God is trying to help me grow too. And one of the ways that He's trying to help me grow is to get to a place where I don't ever get confused with thinking that God needs me, but rather that I can recognize that God has it all under control, even before I come to Him asking Him. And I think that's the key when Jesus wakes up, is He had it under control already. Do I need to demonstrate that I got it under control? Okay, peace be still. And He spoke to the waves and the winds. But could we trust that while Jesus appears to be sleeping and we're afraid and we're not sure that He has it under control, is it possible to trust that He already had it under control before He spoke it into calm? That's what God's working with me on. And I think that's why Jesus woke up and said, "You of little faith, why are you so afraid?" That His expectation was that they could have and should have trusted that he had it under control, even as he appeared to be sleeping. Number 7, did Jesus lecture the disciples about the importance of prayer when he woke up? He didn't. He lectured them about their inability to trust. Um, and I think most of us, when we read a text like this, um, we um, we say, see, that's why we need to pray. And I don't think that's a wrong interpretation. And I'm not saying we don't pray. I hope everything that I said up to now helps you understand that. But the the correction was not about the need to pray. It was about the need to trust. That God already had it under control even before they came to Jesus. Number 8, how did the disciples respond according to 8:27? They said, "What kind of man is this? Even the winds and the waves obey him." And so that's where I said from the beginning that they went to Jesus as if he could help, but it's strange because at the same time they seem surprised when he does, or at least at the way he does. The second part, were these strangers who didn't know Jesus prior to this? And the obvious answer is no. These were his closest disciples who had been walking with him. And even if it was just for a short time, yet nonetheless, they seem surprised that Jesus has this sort of authority. And the third part says, is it possible to know Jesus, but still not really know who Jesus is? Well, apparently, because that's who they were. That's what was going on here. They they supposedly knew Jesus, but they didn't understand the power that Jesus had. And I think sometimes we have been perhaps Christians for a long time and supposedly know Jesus, and yet maybe only know a philosophy or know a code of ethics. But is it possible that we don't know the power that he could? See, we reason things as if Jesus is not all powerful. We reason things as if God doesn't have the power to overcome the norms of life. Um, and I hear it in the church all the time. We make plans and consider things as if God is not omnipotent, all powerful. Um, and so it seems as if we don't know who Jesus really is, despite saying that we know him. And then number 9 says, what should we take away from this? A, pray when things are hard. Actually, it wouldn't be so bad if you came away from this with that thought. I'm not sure that that's the point, but it wouldn't be so bad if you made a point to when things get hard praying. I don't think there'd be anything wrong with that. B, don't bother praying. That is definitely not the what I'm trying to say here or what we should take away. C, we need to have such an intimate knowledge of the Father and the Son, and sure, the Holy Spirit, that we know what he is capable of and therefore don't fear. Sure, we can pray, but our prayers should not be as one who doesn't know who we are talking to. And we should know that God is already at work. So, can we, when we go to prayer, already be in his presence, already know him in such a way that when we pray, our prayer is as one who trusts that God is already at work, that God has the answer and the plan, and that the only reason we're really praying is not to get him involved, but actually to get us involved in the plan that he already has, to sort of get ourselves in line with what God is already at work doing. And I think that's honestly, I think that's very different from how a lot of people pray and how a lot of people think about their interaction with God. And I think that we need to, as the people of God, mature in our thinking about what prayer looks like, and recognize that prayer is us getting involved in what God is already at work doing. We're not, I know people say, well, prayer moves the hand of God. Yeah, okay, yeah, I know. Not saying it doesn't, surely, but is it possible that God is already at work and prayer gets us involved in that work? And I'll just say in my life, what God has taught me the most is the importance of me getting involved in what he's doing, not in my role in trying to get him involved in stuff. Um, I'm like, God, come get involved in this, do this thing. Don't you care about what's going on here? And he's like, yeah, so I'm already in control of this. You think you're in control. I've been trying to get you involved, but you seem to be kind of out there doing things yourself. So why don't you come talk to me a little more, and I'll get you involved so that you can see what I'm doing here. Um, and that's what I wanted to talk about in this text. That's what I think God is talking to me about, and I hope to our church about.